Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the hair metal revolution, where we're taking the music back and giving it the respect that it deserves. You guys know what I always say. Today, we're talking about the band Dokken, right? I'm going to ask you guys a question. Now, I don't want to use this word, underrated, because in so many ways, Dokken's not really underrated because any true hard rocker, metalhead, glam head, whatever you call yourself, whatever you want to call the genre, to me, it's all rock and roll. That the majority of the people all know Dokken. And if you don't know Dokken, then I guess you don't really know too much about 80s music, do you? Because if you know anything about 80s music, you know about Dokken. Okay. So, but the question is, what happened? What I mean is, what happened is Dokken is a band that had all the elements, just like almost every other band. But for whatever reason, if you lived through the 80s, Dokken was always the opener. They never made it to headline status of arena level. They never, when I'm talking about, they never headline arena shows. And I try to sit there and I try to think about it, like why, right? Because you got to have some elements in a band. You really got to have two key. Listen, 4 members, 5 members, every member of a band is important. Do not get me wrong. Do not get me wrong. Every person in a band is important. But in most cases, you got to have at least 2 main ingredients of a band, right? You got to have a lead singer. And a lot of times you got to have that guitar player, right? Don Dokken. He could sing better than most of the bands in the 80s. Don Dokken is up there with one of the best voices that can hit every different pitch out there. I mean, the only person, you could out-sing Don, maybe people like Dio, maybe Sammy Hagar, so there are freak singers, but compared to, no offense to none of these wonderful singers, no offense to Vince Neil, Stephen Pearcy, let me see, Stephen Pierce, God, there's a lot of them. Don Dokken, David Lee Roth, Don Dokken, no offense to those singers, could out-sing any one of those guys. So you had a singer that can hit every pitch there is. And guitar player, George Lynch. I mean, what guitar player does not like George Lynch? Almost a lot of people would say, if you make up top 5 or top 10 guitar players of the 80s, I guarantee you almost 90% of everybody's poll is going to have George Lynch. So you have George Lynch and you have Don Dokken. So what was it? I mean, what... it doesn't make a whole lot of sense. If you think about Dokken's career, if you look at true 80s music, true 80s hard rock music, you look at the bands. I always look at the bands that really started the 80s movement. The bands that said, fuck the second British invasion, the second, the second invasion, the first British invasion was the Beatles and stuff like that. And the second, Flock of Seagulls and all that, and then the 80s hard rock said, fuck the second movement of the British invasion. Fuck them. We're going to take over, so, in the early 80s, you had Motley Crüe, you had Twisted Sister, Rat, Doc, a lot of people, Kicks. Don't forget about Kicks. Kicks started in the 70s, Van Halen, these were the bands that took their feet and stepped on the second British invasion and said, hey, we're taking over. We're going to show what real music is. And Dokken was, in all cases, real music. And what I mean by real music is, sometimes people will say in the later 80s, rock became bubblegum. Everybody likes the different taste of music. Everybody likes different taste. But nobody will ever say Dokken was bubblegum music. No one. And if you do, then you don't really know music. Because If you think about it, here, I want to share screen here. Let's look at their album sales. Now, of course, these don't count the new way on how they count music because of streaming services and all that. So this is when albums were, counted. So Back for Attack sold 1 million copies. And of course, that came out in 87. Actually, their highest selling album, Back for Attack. But, it's kind of weird. 87 was the height when music really, truly exploded, according to album sales. 87, 88. But most people remember Dokken more from Under the Lock and Key and Tooth and Nail. Under the Lock and Key, 1 million. Beast, Best from the Beast. Now that's basically a live album. Dokken, 57. I don't know why it says 1994. Well, let me see here. Shadow Life. Okay. Now, if you try to do a comparison of how many albums, they kind of sold, I guess the closest band you could try to do a comparison probably would be Rat. I'm talking about according to album sales. Hold on. Let me get rid of this. Let me pull up Rat to do a comparison. Now, Rat, of course, out of the cellar sold, 3 million copies, of course. And Invasion of Privacy, 2 million. But then if you look at Reach for the Sky, you look for Dancing on the Cover, 1 million, and Detonator. So it's kind of strange where popularity-wise, Rat was a headlining act, mostly because Out of the Cellar sold 3 million and Invasion of Privacy. But then the rest of the 80s, they were still a headlining act. They only sold 1 million. So in some ways, Dokken sold a little bit more than the later Rat did. So I'm just using Rat as a comparison. I'm not saying one's better than the other and not, but I'm just trying to use like a comparison. Okay. So hopefully that looks like, so if you look, what's interesting about Dokken, there's a lot of familiarities with the band Motley Crüe. You're like, there is? Well, not just because they came out during the same time. If you didn't know this, all right? Okay, so Motley Crüe, Too Fast for Love, some people call it a glorified demo tape, right? Motley Crüe came out with their Too Fast for Love themselves, and then I forgot, I don't know if it's Elektra bought, signed Motley Crüe, and they re-edited, they reproduced the album Too Fast for Love. The exact same thing happened to Dokken. If you didn't know that, in case you guys didn't know that, there's two Breaking the Chains. There's a 1981 Breaking the Chains that album more came out it came out in Europe, not really an American release, kind of like Motley Crüe, Too Fast for Love. Demo, they made it themselves. And then when Elektra, is it Elektra who signed Motley Crüe? Let's just say they did. They re-edited it, reproduced it, and it came out in 1983. Almost exact same thing happened with Dokken. So a lot of people think Dokken debuted in 83, which in fact they did not. They formed in 78. They actually debuted in 81. You guys see what I'm saying? It's almost identical to how Motley got started, right? And then, of course, Tooth and Nail. If you look at, if you guys listen, we know when grunge took over, or when the music world, I'm talking about the studios, the social media, the TVs, they kind of crown prematurely, grunge, and they kind of put it against metal. But of course, we all know who won at the end. Metal did. Grunge died quicker than anything else. But Dokken came out with an album in 95 in the heart of the popularity of it, called Dysfunctional. If you have not listened to the album Dysfunctional, it is really a decent Dokken album. We all think about, the first for, but go back and go back and listen to Dysfunctional. It's actually a really good, solid album. Now, Shadow Life, not so well, but let's go back here. Let's, like I said, you heard what I said. Los Angeles, 78. And of course, they split up in 89 and then they got back together because, people said the band's dysfunctional. But what bands were not dysfunctional, right? I mean, some people say Rat was the most dysfunctional band, there is. But the thing is about Dokken and Rat, even though people say they're dysfunctional, they still came out with over 3-4 albums together. So, dysfunctional or not, they still came out, and not just came out with music, they came out with great music. So how dysfunctional they were, that's kind of up to people. And what's cool is Dokken played with Bobby Blotzer in the beginning. We see here and Juan Crosher. I always say his name bad. So a lot of these bands knew each other, and one of the great things about Dokken, especially Don was good friends with the band Great White. And actually right here, Great White. He actually helped Great White to get signed. He actually told his people about Great White, and why that's important. You're like, so what? He told the company about Great White. There was a lot of bands back in the day. It was cutthroat, right? It's about me making it. Don was true to his friends, right? He helped out other bands to make it, even though they're themselves were working their ass off to make it themselves, right? I mean, they were really working their ass off to make it themselves, but they still cared for other bands. So a lot of, if you are a Great White fan, you could probably say, thanks to Don Dokken, Great White probably would have gotten noticed sooner or later, but Don Dokken helped out. First of all, let me look at the chat real quick. My favorite Dokken, I think, In My Dreams, but I love them all. The thing is about In My Dreams and stuff, when you think of ballads, right? Every Rose Has a Thorn. I Don't Know What You Got for Tail's Gone. There's a lot of great ballads out there, but Dokken ballads weren't like your typical kind of ballads, right? It reminds me a lot of when people call Cinderella's Nobody's Fool a ballad. I guess they are kind of a ballad, but they're kind of a more metal rock type of ballad. You know what I'm talking about? It's like in a different. If you put ballads in different category, it's almost like Dokken's ballads is in a different category versus other ballads. It's almost like it's, you put it just with their heavy songs, right? So they're not your typical. I'm not saying even the word girly ballads or whatever, but they were more solid and hardcore type of ballads, if that makes sense. Favorite Dokken song, Deep Waters, a B-side on a Japanese release of Shadow Life. All right. I'm trying to remember how Deep Waters sound. I mean, I'm going to have to type that in and listen to it. I wish I could do it here, but then we'll probably get bounced off because, all the copyright that's out there. Howdy, everyone. Hey, what's up, man? What's up, my friend? Man, Roger Blair, he's been with me on this, with different channels for so long. And I appreciate it, Roger. Appreciate you being here. It means a lot to me. Now, if you go back to here, right? So if you go back, Alone Again, Burning Like a Flame, they sold more than 10 million albums worldwide. They did pretty well. The live album, Best from the East, was nominated for a Grammy Award for Best Metal Performance, which they should. The thing is, even though Dokken never hit arena level, if you ever saw Dokken live, especially in the heyday of 80s and 90s, You couldn't find a more real sounding band. You know what I'm talking about? Like sounding like if you listen to a CD, you listen to a cassette, and when you listen to it raw and real, it's a little bit different. But because how Don sings, how good he sings, it was closer to what you get from a CD and record, because Don could really sing. Like I was saying in the beginning of the show, the difference between Don, between a lot of singers, is he could hit different levels of it with his voice. Don was a true singer. So if you ever saw Dokken live, it was almost like you're listening to a cassette and CD, just with the raw sound. You know what I mean? And guys, listen, shows, rock is meant to be live. That's why I do live shows here, because we're talking about a rock channel, right? This is live. You know, if I make a mistake, so what? You see it. You see me make a mistake. It doesn't, you know what I mean? But it's raw and it's real. You know, I got nothing against people who do a lot of recordings and take it back and they pre-cut it. They add this, they add that, they sharpen it up to make it look good. It's almost like when you sometimes in the later 80s, the albums got too complex. It got too overproduced. You know what I'm talking about? And when the earlier stuff had that raw energy sound, that's how I like my live shows, raw and energy. Nothing against people who want to pre-cut videos, but I think the best shows are live. That's just my opinion. So if you're watching me live, I appreciate every single one of you. Okay, early years, 76, 83. I'm just, you know, we're not gonna go through everything. Okay, we're gonna commercial success, 83. That's when Breaking the Chain came out. It wasn't like a hit, but there were some great songs on Breaking the Chain. They really are. Their debut album don't get enough credit, right? I mean, first of all, the first song, Breaking the Chains, is a great song. Paris, great song. So as raw you're going to get from the first album, it really is a solid album. You know, again, my favorite song on it is Breaking the Chains, but listen to Breaking the Chains, listen to Paris. There's a lot of great songs on this. Then, of course, my opinion, their breakout album was Tooth and Nail. That's kind of got them on, you know, the first million copies sold. You know, if you look at their song list, I mean, of course of all, Tooth and Nail, Just Got Lucky, Into the Fire, Alone Again. So this is when Dokken hit their peak. You got to remember, guys, you know, one of the most beautiful thing about bands that came out, especially in the early 80s, you even see with Def Leppard, where bands were given chances of other albums. You know what I'm talking about? They were allowed to create their craft, you know, and so a lot of bands got better and better and better. You know, a good example is look at Aerosmith, how their first album was so, but you know, next album better, you know, until they came out with Toys in the Attic, which, you know, exploded. So a lot of these bands had deals where they're going to have a second and third album and stuff, and that's when their craft really comes together. And this album, that craft came together. Nowadays, if you don't hit it big off the first album, you're gone. That's it. You're done. You know, that's one of the most beautiful thing about the early 80s and the 70s is 70s and 80s bands were allowed to come, you know, they were allowed to build their craft. They got better. You know, when they played these live shows, they got better and better and better. I mean, again, George Lynch, top 10, top 5 guitar player, you know, and he just, as a guitar player, George Lynch just got better and better and better and better. You know what I mean? And then, of course, on the Lock and Key, Unchained and Night, great song, The Hunter, In My Dreams. One of my personal favorite, It's Not Love. I love that song. It's Not Love. I love the energy. I love how fast the song is. You know what I mean? So this is really high peak Dokken, you know, really at their high peak. Hold on. I want to go back to the chat for a second. And Heaven Sent. The problem with Dokken is that they didn't stay together with the original lineup. Too much internal strife. I saw them at the first and two now. Yeah. We kind of talked about that. The internal issues that they had. A lot of bands, Rat had that internal issues. And in some ways, Motley Crüe had it later in their career. They fired, Vince Neil. Of course, he's back with the band. So yeah, if they never had the internal fighting, would things be different? That's a good question. It's hard to say. Here, Six Flags, California, just outside of LA. Second time at Monster Rock in LA. Incredible experience. Just wish they would have stayed together with the original lineup. Too many changes. Yeah, unfortunately, and Don, of course, we all know he had the surgery on his voice, and he had some issues with the surgery and all that. But I still appreciate Don Dokken. He still goes out there and sings here, there, here and there, and we love Jeff Pilzer, Mick Brown, George Lynch still plays guitar and all that. Do we wish they could have all got along to a point where they all stayed together solid? Of course we do. We wish that a Rat. It is what it is. So, let me see here. So again, Unlock the Key. And then one of the albums that actually sold more than all these was Back for Attack, but a lot of people don't really talk about Back for Attack. Great songs. I mean, this is where when a lot of bands were kind of going real commercial, you could say. They were really doing the recordings where I don't know how you explain it, where they recorded the sound like more in the box, where they kind of turned down the guitar a little bit, trying to make it a little bit more pop to the masses, because they were trying to sell to all sides. But Back for Attack wasn't that. Back for Attack was just like in your face, balls out type of album. I mean, Heaven Sent, Burning Like a Flames. I mean, that's not super heavy, but Burning Like a Flame is a great song. And of course, we all know Dream Warriors was really for the movie Nightmare for Elm Street Part 3, Dream Warriors. It was on the soundtrack, and they added it on to there. So Dream Warriors wasn't a song that was technically made for this album. It was a very huge hit for Dokken for Nightmare on Elm Street Part 3, which they were so perfect for that movie and their song. So that song came part of this album, but more or less Dream Warriors was more a soundtrack song, but fantastic song. And one of the things, if you guys haven't listened to the last Dokken album, Heaven Comes Down, yes, at that point, Don Dokken is the only one that was original in the band, but Heaven Comes Down, it's a really good, solid album. I treat it more like a Don Dokken solo album, but I mean, I get it why he called it Dokken. I mean, it is, but Heaven Comes Down was a real solid album, and I recommend a lot of you to listen to it. But again, when you look at all the songs that they have, what was it? Was it the dysfunctional of the band that they just did not get over that one hump to make it where they were the headliner for arenas? What was it? What do you guys think it was? I mean, was Back for Attack not commercial enough? Should they done more of a typical type of ballad or something that you know what I'm talking about? Like, what do you guys think that what was that hump? Why didn't they hit that. I mean, they had this. I always wanted. Listen, if you saw a concert and Dokken was the opening act, that's a gift. I really treat it as a gift. I mean, my God, you're seeing a band and Dokken's opening up. Holy shit, that's a concert. That's a tour. I consider Dokken, even though there was an opening act a lot in the 80s as like a co-headliner, they were, to me, that good. And I always wanted to know what would have been like if Dokken had an arena level, a full set, a real huge set list, an hour and a half, 2 hours of what songs, what they would have done with their songs. Because when you have a shorter list, a lot of times in the 80s, they play more of the songs off their last album, the album that they're touring on, because you got to understand, the 80s were different. The concerts in the 80s, in the mid 90s, were there to support the album, for album sales. Nowadays, bands don't make money off the albums. They make the money off the concerts. That's why concerts are like $100 now to $300. Where back in the 80s, you got a ticket for $20, $30 and it's general admission. You go anywhere you want. We're never ever going to see that again. And the concerts were to support the album. So in those concerts in the 80s, they sold, they sang 70% of the songs from the last album. And then the 30% are usually they're more of huge hits. So, and all that. So, what was it? Okay. I know sometimes when you say things and you're just thinking out of the box, people are going to take things out of words. Was it that they weren't? I don't know. Was it because Don wasn't as super handsome as David Lee Roth? I'm just bringing that out there. I'm just trying to figure it out, or was he not good looking as Bret Michaels or something? Or, you know what I mean? Or was George Lynch not like extra loud, like in the press, like the Bad Boys or something? Because the Motley Crüe was considered the bad boys of rock, right? They've always gotten in trouble. Was it that? Did the group Dokken need to get into more trouble? Oh my God, there's the Bad Boys coming to concert. Oh my God, look at, what was it? Because Dokken was, it's the thing is about Dokken was a true solid band. Yeah, that internal fight, don't get me wrong, but I'm talking about the way they play, the way they sing. Were they not flashy enough? Because they had the songs. And not just having the songs and videos. It takes the radio stations, MTV at the time, to want to push you out even more. Should they been more Bad Boys? Should they, I don't know. Should they dye the hair more white? I mean, or what was it, right? I mean, listen. Let's be honest here. Whitesnake had to get a whole new makeover for their album in 87. They took some of their original songs and re-rocked it. They had to do the whole not makeup, but David Coverdale dyed his hair. They had to make him look more 80s and stuff. I mean, and work for them. I mean, I'm not bashing Whitesnake, but Whitesnake did a whole makeover. They did a whole image makeover to get them to be accepted in the later 80s, and it worked for them. Was that it? Were they? It's hard for me to try to figure it out, because by the time Unlock Your Key came out, they should have went headline. And I is it because enough people didn't buy their albums? I mean, no. I scratched my head on it, because do I say Dokken deserved more? Yes, they did deserve more, because they were that good of a band. They were one of the bands that really knew how to play. Don knew how to sing. George Lynch knew how to play. I mean, it's the whole. It's just, you know, it's weird to me. I truly, you can see me struggling, trying to guess, like, what was it? What is it? You know, and I'm trying to look up something here real quick too. You see here, where I'm trying to, and you know, and hold on a second, hold on. You know, I mean, if you think about interviews, Jeff Pelson, he was a great talker in interviews. A lot of interviews he did with George Lynch. Jeff was the guy in the band that knew how to talk. Mick Brown, they all knew how to talk. So they were great in interviews, but it's just scratching my head trying to figure out why they weren't huge. You know, and then bands like Bon Jovi, you know, skyrocketed, and to this day, anybody ever ask me who's a better band, in my opinion, which I like all music, but I'm always going to pick Dokken over Bon Jovi. Dokken was more true to rock, where John was always trying to change it to Bruce Springsteen, New Jersey sound. I mean, that's just a fact. I hate to say that. I'm sorry, but and all that. So first of all, guys, I want to thank you guys for all being here live, who's here or not. If this is your first time to Hair Metal Revolution channel, please subscribe. I do live shows. My live shows now are on Tuesdays and Friday. And I'm going to I'm thinking about a live show for this Friday. I think of doing the topic. I want to do the topic of Striper. I think Striper owes his dues. I think people should talk more about, you know, the bravery of Striper. I don't think they're a band that gets enough credit because I don't know, it's because have a pleasant day. Hey, David, you got to leave? Man, David, you don't want to leave? Not right now. Every single day on this channel, I put out a poll. Every single day, there's a poll on this channel, and I put out shorts every day. The poll could be from the 80s, 90s. It's just like from memories, you know, remembering the good old times. That's what the shorts are designed to do. But if you like poll, I put out a poll every single day with different topics. Like today's poll, pick your favorite song with the word dream in the title. And of course, Dokken, Dream Warriors, you know, and Dream On, Dream Police, Dreams, Van Halen. You know, I got to be honest with you guys, man. Aerosmith, Dream On, I can't listen to that song no more. Radio killed that song. And I'm surprised that Dream Warriors only has 19%. I mean, you know, Dream Warriors, the song Dream Warriors and Van Halen Dreams, to me, should be leading this poll. But hey, this is what the poll's here for. This is what's spoken. And every single day, guys, there's different polls here. And what I love to hear is yesterday's poll, George Lynch, you know, is recognized by the people. Over 18,000 people voted George Lynch. I love that. So there's different polls. You've never been here to this channel. I put out polls every single day, and all the polls are meant to be fun. They're just designed to have the conversation about the music that we love. That's all it is. Now people have been emailing me a lot on the side, and everybody wanted to ask me my opinion on the new Guns N' Roses songs, you know, and I was thinking about putting out a video for it, but, you know, I already did a live show about Guns N' Roses just like last week, So I didn't want to do another Guns N' Roses because I just did it before I knew there's 2 new songs. And what I'm going to say is about the 2 new songs, I mean, you know, it's not great. It's not bad, but I'm just being honest. You guys know me. I have to be honest with you. I'm never gonna say anything to sugarcoat anything with you guys. There are probably 2 songs that I'm not going to look for. I'm not looking to listen to them. I mean, if it's on, I'm not going to turn it off. It's not bad, but they're not songs that if I create a playlist, say I created a playlist of 20 best Guns N' Roses songs, they're not songs I put on. Maybe they'll grow on me. Maybe I'll have to listen to a little bit more, but the best part is at least they're coming out with some songs, right? They're coming out with some songs. That's good. That's great. Maybe Guns N' Roses will come out with a new album or something. You know what I mean? Like all that. But the 2 new songs, they're just so. Not great, not bad. I listened to them once, and that's good enough. Again, if it's on the radio, I won't turn it off, but I'm not looking for it. That's the best way for me to answer that song. So I love all the bands you talk about. They're great bands. I mean, 80s got crapped on. They truly did. And and people don't understand the length. I mean, it's I don't know how many years you go back. Do you go back to 78 with Van Halen? Do you go back with the early AC/DC? The genre of music lasted longer than most all music. I mean, people talk about grunge did this, but grunge died quick. Grunge truly did die quick. And look who's out there, right? All they do is all go hurt themselves. So and all that. But beyond that, where are the polls at? It's on the post. It's on my post. So for here. Let me put it here. There you go. If you go to my channel, if you go to my post, or you can just click on that, there's polls every single day. Every single day I have a new poll, and they're just ideas. Like if you guys ever have like an idea for a kind of a poll that you want, just tell me. Just like, hey, email me at hairmetalrevolution@gmail.com. So just email me. Say, hey, Eric, on your Tuesday live show, Friday live show, do a live show on this band or this topic this year. Just tell me. Let me know, because even though we title a show, everybody knows that the show could go in different directions depending on what the people want from you guys who texting right now. We go anywhere. So sometimes a title is just to get us together and talk about the music that we love. Doesn't necessarily have to be about one band or not. We can talk about it. So again, email me, say, hey, dude, hey, can you do a poll about this, the 4 greatest this or greatest this, or bands that have this title in the song? It doesn't matter. Just tell me, hey, talk about Megadeth on Tuesday. Talk about Metallica on Friday. Talk about Cinderella. It doesn't matter. Just tell me and we can do it. I just love talking to you guys. Again, these shows, all rock shows, should be live. That's just me. I'm sorry, that's just me. So beyond that, I appreciate you guys very much, and I see you guys this Friday. The link's not up yet, but unless it changes, I think we should give respect to Stryper. We should talk about Stryper because they deserve some respect. So beyond that, I'll talk to you guys later. Rock on.